Welcome back. Today on Perspectives, we complete our four-part series looking at the chilling human rights abuses taking place around the world. Every day this week, we've been shining a light on minority groups facing persecution. Tonight, we look at the persecution of the Ahmadiyya sect of Islam, who've been facing religious discrimination, systematic and sometimes state-sanctioned oppression since the movement's inception in 1889. Owen Alterman reports.
Ahmadis practicing their faith inside a mosque in Lahore, Pakistan. This is what they passed in order to get there. Filing past a checkpoint. Police keeping watch. That's because of this. Attacks like this one in 2010, when gunmen struck at two Ahmadi mosques in Lahore, killing 70.
One attacker fired gunshots from the window of the basement. No police showed up. We broke the door and got out. He didn't follow us, but exploded himself.
Ahmadis are a sect of 10 to 20 million worldwide, including an estimated 4 million in Pakistan, near where the group was founded in 1889 by Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who saw himself as a latter-day prophet, a successor to or even reappearance of Muhammad.
We believe in the forthcoming promised Messiah and the reformer of the age, very similar to the Messiah who came, Jesus Christ, 2,000 years ago, but in the form of Islam.
Ahmadis see themselves as Muslims, but many other Muslims see them as heretics. In Pakistan and elsewhere, that means they're a target.
Very similar, I think, to the first Messiah. When Jesus came, he was persecuted. The Romans, they lived in fear of their lives in the Roman Empire. And likewise, the Muslims today are persecuting the Ahmadiyya community for accepting the second Messiah.
The dogma of the finality of prophethood and the idea that Muhammad was the last prophet of any kind is a very important dogma in the Muslim tradition. And whoever deviates from it, or at least his views could be interpreted as deviating from it, he is in big trouble with mainstream Islam.
According to Human Rights Watch, Pakistani officials have destroyed Ahmadi commentaries on the Quran, banned using any Islamic terminology on Ahmadi wedding invitations, barred Ahmadi funeral prayers.
We could not meet other people with the greetings of Assalamu alaikum, which only means peace be upon you. So that is forbidden to Ahmadis. We are not allowed to call the prayer in our minarets, in our mosques.
The situation facing Ahmadis has gotten the attention of the United Nations. But in international media, it's often overshadowed by other stories in Pakistan, as Ahmadis are not free to practice their faith in the very country where the sect has its deepest roots. Owen Alterman, i24 News.
And Asia Advocacy Director for Human Rights Watch, John Sifton, joins me now from New York. John, a pleasure to have you with us. Now, the Ahmadiyya Muslim movement emerged from the Sunni tradition of Islam. What makes them, to this day, vulnerable to persecution?
Well, a lot of extremist groups in Pakistan consider the sect heretics because they view their founding leader as another imam, and that is profoundly disturbing to Sunnis who view that as undermining their view of Islam. But the fact of the matter is these people view themselves as Muslim, and that is the central beef, the central problem that the Pakistani extremist groups that tend to persecute them have. They essentially want them to denounce that they're Muslims and say we're not Muslims. And one thing that should be mentioned here is that the Pakistani government has now gotten much more into the game of discriminating against them. I mean, the laws already discriminate against the sect in many respects, but last year, the Pakistani government took the profound step of essentially disenfranchising the entire group by requiring them to renounce their faith in order to get voting ID cards. So now they can't even vote. So what kind of citizens are these that can't even vote in their national elections?
So then, John, what can be done to change this?
Well, it's just also important to understand that they're not alone in being persecuted. Pakistan and the Pakistani society have profound problems with other ethnic and religious minorities, including Christians and Shia Muslims, who are not considered exactly heretics, although they are by some extremist groups. The Pakistani government simply doesn't do a very good job of protecting minorities and religious minorities in particular, and that's why there's so much violence against them. They take draconian steps of, beefing up security and turning off the internet during key religious holidays, but the treatment of the Ahmadiyya is completely different. They are part of the problem as well. They are persecuting them themselves by denying them legal rights and denying them the right to participate in national elections. So that's the real issue here, is that beyond what is suffered by Christians and Shia, the government is sort of out to get Ahmadiyya in a way that other religious minorities aren't suffering.
Right, so I suppose that brings me back to my question, what can be done to change that?
Well, right, so Pakistan is facing extraordinary pressure on its human rights record on a number of fronts, at the UN level and others. But I think what's important to recognize here is that by focusing on this particular problem, we might be able to get more attention on the government's failures writ large, and the government needs to start recognizing that it can't just pretend that all is well with religious minorities in Pakistan. This is look, all these countries in the region are not doing enough to protect religious minorities. India is not doing enough to protect Muslims, and India, has been rightly criticized for that as well. So this is not just about, UN attention. It's also about governments recognizing that they can't just skate on by on religious minority grounds. Every government that attempts to, yeah, go ahead.
No, you complete your sentence. Of course, I asked you the question.
Every government that proclaims a particular group or a particular religion as preeminent among others, which Pakistan does, Indonesia does with its 6 official religions, and Israel does, and the United States often does, according to some of its leaders, is going to face problems with its religious minorities, because you can't make one group preeminent over others.
And of course, I mean, we wanted to focus, or rather shine a light on these human rights violations, particularly groups that seem, to our estimation, that go grossly underreported. Why do you believe there isn't enough of a focus on these kinds of human rights violations to these particular kind of groups?
Because this group has no predominant population in any country. Like the Baha'i and like some other religious minorities, they don't have a champion on the international level. Christians do. I mean, Christians in both Pakistan and India and in Indonesia get the attention of other countries. The small Jewish community in Iran gets attention because of Israel. I mean, they have a champion on the international stage. But with this group, unfortunately, there isn't one. And so that's why groups like Human Rights Watch try to shine a light on this and try to get attention at the United Nations, because otherwise nobody is going to speak up for these people.
Certainly makes your work all the more important. John, thank you for being with us and sharing that perspective. Also joining us today, Munir Oda, who is the productions director at the Muslim television Ahmadiyya International, which is a channel run and funded by donations from Ahmadiyya community members. Munir, great to have you with us. Now, we know that you're from the Ahmadi community in Haifa, in northern Israel. There's a large community, in fact, living there. Talk us through how that came to be the spot for such a significant part of your community to settle.
We had preachers of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community arrive to then Palestine in the early 1900s, as well as the head of the community visiting in the early 1920s. And after his visit, few members of the Ahmadiyya community from India visited Syria and then moved to other countries, and going through Haifa, this is where the first time where local members joined the Ahmadi community, and we have been living there since that time. There is a population of over 2,000 people in Haifa, and we have other members in different parts of the country as well.
Now, Munir, you say that you haven't been persecuted yourself, but you know many Ahmadis who have been. Tell us about that.
Most religious communities, when they start, they get persecuted, and this is no different to the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. But over the history since the establishment of the community. We have faced persecution in different parts of the world, primarily from the Muslims, mullahs or clergy. That's largely because of a misunderstanding that they have about the community. But nevertheless, there is also constitutional discrimination or persecution in different parts of the world, especially Muslim countries like Indonesia, Bangladesh, and primarily Pakistan also, where the discrimination or persecution has been constitutional and supported by the law and the government.
Now, as part of your job, you've covered stories on persecutions of Ahmadis in Pakistan, and you say that something significant to note is that their persecutions are backed up by the Pakistani law and constitution. Of course, we heard that from our previous guest. What can you tell us?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part of the question again?
The fact that much of their persecution is backed up by Pakistani law and constitution, and in fact you cover that a lot in the documentary films that you make. So what can you tell us?
There is clear evidence that even when culprits are caught in mass massacres like the one that took place in Lahore, criminals walk free after being caught and faced by the justice system. The problem in Pakistan that it's almost become unlivable for Ahmadi members. It affects them in their daily life, from children going to school, to teachers, to any professionals working in the country, let alone the governmental or the official processes that they have to declare themselves by force as non-Muslims, and they're not allowed to practice. And if you do practice any of the Muslim or Islamic or use Islamic terminology, like even saying Assalamu alaikum, Shalom aleichem, it is considered as a crime, and you can be locked up for that. And that's just by simply anyone reporting you, even if it's fake. You can be locked up and face persecution and punishment.
And just finally, and quite briefly, we're running out of time. What do you hope the message, or what rather is your message through the films that you make about this community? What do you hope people learn?
This is a religious community, as I said again, the first and foremost, our first turn is towards God, and we pray also. We obviously feel the pain for our Ahmadi brothers and sisters around the world where they're persecuted, so we turn to Him for the relief of that distress and pain. Nevertheless, the community is established in 200 countries. I heard your previous speaker. We don't really exercise pressures on those countries who perform such persecution or discrimination. We just want to create awareness and to kind of help in the relief of the stress that is faced by Ahmadi Muslims around the world. But we certainly do not want to advocate in any shape or form any sanctions or any measures taken against those countries, because obviously those will affect the people of those countries and Ahmadis as well.
Well, Munir Oda, we wish you the very best of luck with your work, and thank you for sharing that perspective with us here.
Thank you very much.
All right, that does bring us to the end of today's edition. I'm Tracy Alexander. Thank you for joining us.